Welcome, everybody, to High Tech on the Low, episode 39. Kapil, how are you today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. As always, it's really an honor to have you, first of all the way from Singapore right now, too. So we're doing it over Zoom and having a good time with it. And I always, like to just give a shout out to our community front team who sponsors the High Tech on the Low podcast, where we have 12 different communities, 6 different verticals, and 3,000 members all looking to connect to try to get more out of the startup ecosystem. So, the very fun thing today about talking with you, first of all, is I would love for you to introduce yourself to the people at home who are listening, but is that you are an expert in innovation. And what I really am hoping to get out of this kind of conversation today is ways for entrepreneurs around the world, in Israel, wherever it may be, to understand ways in which innovation can be applied in ways that you may see differently, in ways that you have your own opinion, especially coming from the kind of East Asian market and Asian markets, as to how they can apply it and how they can kind of jump in to these markets and grow their business in innovative ways. So Kapil, I'll let you take it away. Give us a little introduction about yourself and let's get into it.
Yeah, sure. Hey, my name is Kapil Kane. I currently live and work in Shanghai, where I run innovation activities for Intel. We run our corporate innovation accelerator here, where we enable and empower our employees to turn the ideas into inorganic business growth for us. And we do it in the startup community with the help of startup community in the ecosystem, just like any other startup would do. We treat our internal projects as startups. And so that's the reason I am involved with the startup community, although, I'm part of a large corporate. As for my background, I grew up in India in a very small place called Goa. It's a tiny seaside province. And I got my undergrad and master's in engineering in the US. I worked at Apple doing product design. I moved to China with product design about 15 years ago, and I've been living in China ever since. And I joined Intel about 10 years ago to do product design. And then I moved into this innovation role about 5 years ago.
Well, that's very cool.
Co-founded GrowthX. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very cool. First of all, I'll tell you that I think every single Israeli listening to this conversation today will definitely know where you're from, being that Goa is one of the main destinations for people after the army, as I'm sure you probably even know yourself. Yep. Right. So that's always exciting. And, what I think is, super interesting is exactly kind of what you said, that you come from this corporate, kind of background, but because in the way Intel deals with, their projects internally and other things like that, it's a very unique situation, right? Because you see the startups from, the internal process, right? You see it as like within your corporate structure. So I think it's very unique. And obviously, you have a great, experience with the, East Asian and Asian markets. So it's very interesting. So, let's just, dive into it right now and kind of talk about one of the things I think that's very, big in this world is how to enter into new markets, right? And how to enter into specifically, places like China and East Asia markets in general, and kind of how do you do that and how do you do it the right way, right? Because there's a lot of, I think, people out there who think, I know the best way. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go, push, and they just think it's going to be right, and then they show up and nothing works. Everything's wrong. People, they burn themselves in the end. So, I guess what my first question of the day is, when you are a startup considering breaking into, the East Asian market and specifically China, we can even say, what are, some of your key pieces of advice for the guy starting out to consider?
I think let's just focus on China because it's the biggest market out here. And especially, let's say if you are an Israeli startup, I think one of the things you need to look at is that you just because you're successful in your country doesn't mean you can just come into China and there'll be a red carpet laid out for you. You need to have something, a very strong value proposition or a key selling point, or I would say an unfair advantage that you cannot be easily replicated and copied in China, because if you don't have that the key unique selling point or that IP, you'll be easily outcompeted in
Right.
China.
Right.
Okay.
Of course.
Uh, so you need to have that defendable IP. That's one thing. The second thing is, I think something which people don't really understand is that you need to kind of localize yourself in China. And by that, I mean not just your solution, but also you need to have local partners, local advisors. You need to align with, uh, let's say, the government's, the general top-down policies, the
Right.
national policies. And also you need to be mindful of what the regional priorities are. So for example, maybe Shanghai is focusing more on the AI. And even within Shanghai, there are certain districts that focus on certain things. And so you need to be aware of all these things. And again, China, although it's like one big country, there are other nuances as well. Like, you can think of Beijing as one hub of innovation. Shanghai is another. Shenzhen is another. Then there are other ones like Nanjing, Hangzhou. So you cannot just treat it as like, one big country and one size fits all.
Right, it's not China
really
in a vacuum, right? It's like China has a lot of different parts to it, right? You can't just look at it as this just like singular entity. I mean, it makes total sense, right? It's the same thing. It's a huge country, ton of people. You can't do that. I totally understand.
Yeah, yeah. And the third key thing is that you need to have like a long-term view, because a lot of times, actually, the way the business happens in China is through building trust, through building relationships. That matters more than your credentials or anything else. That's the biggest key. So if you want to enter China, you need to be there in it for a long haul. And you just, like, meet people, get trust with the people, show your value, and that's how you build slowly. So I think that's something, maybe, and I think maybe in general, I think even in the Silicon Valley, right? I think on the outside, we think, oh, wow, that guy is, like, let's say Mark Zuckerberg or whoever, we think, oh, he's so brilliant. But they need to have connections. They need to have, they need to know the people, know the right people. And it's the same thing in China as well, is that you need to get to know the people, you need to get to know the policies. And one good thing is that you can always know where China is looking at, because we have these 5-year plans where we exactly specify this is what we are going to look at. For example, the 13th five-year plan, which was 5 years ago, they said that manufacturing in China 2025 was one of the priorities. That means industries 4.0,
right?
Okay. AI.
Okay.
They also had like blockchain as another important policy. So if you know what these policies are, you know what to look for or what kind of project to bring to China, right?
And do you find do you find that the success rates, for different startups are really dependent upon their alignment with these 5-year programs?
Absolutely. If it's like the thing with the Silicon Valley, right? Let's say, and I'm not sure about Israel because I never been there, but I know, you guys are super creative and, you build amazing technologies, cutting edge. But let's say in the Valley, because, that's where, I spent.
We can talk in general. We don't have to just talk about Israel, entrepreneurship in general. It's all good.
Yeah. So there, most companies, let's say Uber, they go against the grain. They challenge the common norms. They try to play in the gray area and go against the big brother, right?
Right. Be innovative, right? That buzzword, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's one thing you need to know, is that you need to kind of be in the stream. You cannot swim against the current. You may have some leeway, but the most if you want to be successful, you need to align yourself to these national policies, and it's very easy to find out what these policies are because they are published in both Chinese as well as English, and you can always follow, let's say, local VCs, local tech media, tech podcasts to see what's going on, to keep an eye.
Right. And now, I want to also bring up this very interesting part that you bring up, which is this whole idea of the IP defense, right?
Mm.
Because I
Mm.
think, and I'm sure you've heard this many times from various people trying to enter the Chinese market, that, a lot of people are very scared to enter the Chinese market simply out of the fact that they're, scared that their IP is going to be taken, going to be replicated, going to be whatever. Now, when you say, you need to have defendable IP, what do you really mean? What does that mean? Does it mean like you have to have patents? Does it mean you have to be totally, have the most original idea possible, right? That no one can replicate? What does it mean?
It means that if you're relying on something very simple, because see, China has a lot of engineers, okay, and they are very good at reverse engineering.
Right.
So if your product can be easily reverse engineered, then that's what I mean, that you don't really have a defensible IP. So, but if you have something like, let's say, which has very unique, let's say LiDAR, or like some kind of algorithms in autonomous driving,
Sure.
that only that you are able to do things, and people cannot easily reverse engineer because there's a lot of research gone through it. The algorithms are like, it's not an open source. It is a simple binary that people cannot like, dig in and look at and copy you, or try to reverse engineer. That's a good, like, that's a defensible IP that you can say, you can show that I can do this. For example, I'll just give an example. For example,
yeah, please do. I think it would help.
Yeah. I think we were working with this company. I'm not sure whether it's oh no, it was not an Israeli, but it was a Chinese company which was telling us that there is this problem in autonomous driving called kangaroo effect. So that means if a kangaroo jumps, just crosses the road in front of you by jumping,
right,
most of the autonomous driving solution cannot see it. It's
right, because it's probably not walking in front of you, right? It's not slow, it's not whatever, right? Okay.
Yeah, and so if it turns out it's true, and you cannot replicate what they're doing, then they have a defensible IP, right? But if you just come in and say, hey, I have this this model of group buying, and I have this algorithm, people can easily kind of copy those kind of algorithms.
Right, they can just figure it out. They can put it in their own project, and then the next thing they have their own, startup. You have another competitor, or even someone who just took your idea.
Yeah. So I think so. You need to have something unique that people cannot figure out easily by reverse engineering. So that's one thing I would say, because if that market is lucrative, there'll be easily a competitor will pop up, and they will not. It's not like they're going to steal your thing. Sure. They can reverse engineer.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, like, what in that sense, I think you also made a very interesting point here too, and I think it's something that people forget a lot. And I think you even mentioned with Zuckerberg, which I love too, is that at the end of the day, there's a certain level of who you know and the luck that brings, right? If you know the right person in the right office, in the right department, in the right accelerator, whatever it is, you're gonna just have the likelihood of being just a little bit more successful. How, when you go into China, specifically, considering not only, the different government that many of us aren't necessarily familiar with, but how can you really verify that on the ground in China, that you're talking to the right person, that you're not dealing with someone either A, who wants to replicate your technology and take it from you, or B, that it's actually someone who really has the value to bring you to that next stage of, entering the market, growing your business, and so forth?
I think you need to be careful in the partner you choose to enter the market. And I'll give you some example, okay? So there are some, I think, innovation hubs that have been working with the cross-border governments, and they create things called launching pads or launch pads. And the space we run our accelerator out of, in that space, I have seen Italian landing pad, Singapore landing pad, Korean landing pad, Australian landing pad. So what they do is they create these programs where, let's say, these different governments will bring the startups from their countries in here, and there'll be some sort of a program, like a month or 2 months, or sometimes even 3 months.
Wow!
To see, can these startups, can we really find a solid business case for these startups in China? So you may have done really great in your country, but can you do it here? And they will start from the scratch about their business model, about their value proposition, about their let's say the revenue streams, the cost structures, everything, and they will poke holes at everything.
So
And
it's like a
in that
local
1 month or two,
MVP type of thing, right? It's like a local
yeah,
MVP checking.
exactly. Yeah, local MVP checking, validating your hypothesis with your potential customer segments, and then seeing, okay, does this really hold? Does it have legs? Does your startup have legs or not? So that's one way. And you could actually, there are some very reputable companies who can help you do that. Of course, it comes at a cost. But if it's through such government, cross-border programs, then the cost is usually borne by the government. There are also, let me see. There are also, I think, startups can do it as like a, not a venture builder, but kind of a revenue share model. For example, for a local partner to um, help you grow your China business, you maybe do like some percentage revenue share in country as well.
So you're
So
saying
there are
like I
different
could
kinds of
talk
models,
to
but I
like
think,
yeah, so you mean like I could talk to like, for example, like a Chinese, automaker. Let's say I have an autonomous, car thing, right? And I could talk to a Chinese automaker and be like, hey, put this in your car. And for every car that you sell with this, you get, whatever, 15%, 20%, or however it would work.
that's one way. But even to get to the Chinese local automaker, I'm not sure if you have connections. If you do, that's great. But if not, you could work with like I would call them innovation service providers. Either they
Okay.
are from the government, funded by government, or they are private. But I would most likely lean towards the private ones.
Okay.
Again, it doesn't matter as long as they're reputable, who can help you uh, localize your business model and see if it's really feasible or not, or what you need to change.
Okay. And what about places,
Yeah.
like let's say going and working with,
Mm,
like you guys, like out of Intel or
mm,
other places, that have these, major, kind of MNC
mm.
presence in China. Is that also a
Uh,
viable option or?
yes, actually, I think more than us, okay, because what I do is very much related to, can we use a startup to help grow our business in ways we could not do before?
Uh
So
huh.
if you meet that, then you could be a part of our accelerator, and we run 2 batches a
Right.
year. There's also Microsoft for Startups, which has a bigger intake for the batch.
Right.
I think we have only, like in a year, we only go through like 10 startups.
Uh huh.
But Microsoft for Startups has like much bigger. But what they try to do is they try to work with scale ups, not early stage, but the ones who have already a product, and they try to co-sell the startup solution to their own customers. So they will use Microsoft Salesforce to sell your solution. So that's another way if you want to go that route of joining, like uh, a corporate startup accelerator. And
For
then
sure.
since you talked about Asia, right? I know also of let's say if you want to enter Southeast Asia, then I have a friend who runs a pretty cool accelerator out of Bangkok. It's called Rise,
Rise.
RISE,
Okay.
Rise. And what they do is they have like a corporate membership where there's a bunch of corporates,
Right.
being member of that accelerator, and they will source startups from all around the world
Wow.
based on what the corporates are looking for, specific uh, challenges these corporates are looking for. And they before COVID, they used to run a batch of like, I think 30 to 50 startups in a batch in Bangkok. And I think they would do 2 batches, and they would try to see, can they create a good like a business proof of concept which
Like a good
can
market
fit
fit for
into
the
one.
area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a good market fit. Yeah. So those are also the options, to try if you want to get into Asia, because I think you cannot just simply walk in, and say, okay, I'm going to go in there. There are also lots of startup competitions. China is actually keeps they used to, like I think just before COVID there was something called High Cool. uh yeah, it's the name sounds a bit cheesy, but They were
Yeah, I was going
trying
to say, that
attract
sounds a little
really-
bit like
yeah,
poetry. I'm like, what are we
yeah.
doing? We're reading out slam poetry to the startup community, you know?
No, not haiku, but high cool, HICOOL.
Okay, makes more sense.
Yeah, and they had pretty good, um, I would say, package for startups. Like including, I think, the prize money was pretty significant. Like I think 250 to $300,000, and like for 2 years they would let them be in Beijing and help with the kids' education. It was pretty solid package. So you can also keep an eye on those kind of things. They would help set up the company for you, because China is definitely looking for.
Like they're looking for the
I would
tech,
say,
for the opportunity,
yes,
but it's
yes.
like, but they're, you have to do it in the smart way, right? Like you have to enter it in the way that they're looking for. And, I think that it's actually an amazing thing that you're kind of bringing up, because it's this whole idea of like, yes, you can be kind of like, as you brought up earlier, the Uber, going against the grain and changing the whole, flow. But also there's a certain, kind of beauty to the fact that China says, listen, we have these priorities, we have these things, whether it's, through the corporate look, through the government look, through anything, fit it in, and we might take it, and we might work with you and see if it can be a market fit. Now, Kapil, we're getting towards the end of the podcast, and first of all, there's been so much knowledge for me. I find it just amazing. So I'm hoping people are getting, some value. But the last thing I always like to end with is kind of, what is the advice for an entrepreneur from you, in terms of entering? But, in many ways, you already gave all your advice, right? So I don't really feel like that's the question I want to ask you. What I really want to kind of, ask is, how can an entrepreneur, in a sense, take the, basically for the Chinese market and for, I would say, let's say the Chinese market, specifically East Asian in general, but, how can an entrepreneur kind of balance the humility of saying, okay, I don't know this market, I don't know, these people, I don't know this stuff, okay, I'm going to do it the right way, to also balancing the, the thing about that makes, entrepreneurs so beautiful, which is I'm going to just push and I'm going to go and I'm going to be persistent until I don't stop. How can you balance that in a situation like China, where you do have these kind of more strict regulations and alignments that you have to do?
I think you need to be smart where you want to push. There's this thing in China called showing the face, or giving the face, actually. That means even it's like, even if your teacher is wrong, you need to just respect it. So even if someone superior to you is wrong, you need to just accept it and go. But if you're arguing with your friend, you really, don't, spare any punches. So you need to be smart where you want to fight, and you need to be smart where you want to just, respect, show respect. And that's how you progress in China. That's how you show your humility, be humble, just forget that you know anything, just be in this learning mode, and show, like you said, pushing, do all that pushing internally, and outside, basically be humble. I think that in general, if you are humble, if you are authentic, you can go a long way. Like I said, the key to winning here is to build good relationships, and not to ruffle too many feathers. And the third is to give the face to the ones, that as per the local customs.
For sure. Kapil, listen, I want to just say thank you so much. I know it's late there as well, so I appreciate you, getting online from us, getting online with us, having this really, really interesting conversation. I really thank you taking, the time. So really thank you, and I hope to do it again someday too.
Yeah, I think we can do a round two. Yeah, it was a pleasure, being on your podcast. Definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. If you would like to listen to more episodes not on our YouTube channel, please follow the links below to Spotify or Apple Music.
Watch out, 'cause I know the brakes come.